Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, December 28th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Sugar Bowl against Clemson is in 4 days. I don't know how that happened. Christmas and the long weekend, all of a sudden the game's almost here. And the game against Michigan is in 334 days. Tony Gerderman and I will be headed to New Orleans on Monday to cover the Sugar Bowl. But before we start breaking things down on that game, I wanted to find a little bit more about a very interesting story about Urban Meyer and the NFL that came out over the weekend. My guest today is the author of that story, Kyle Rowland of the Toledo Blade. Kyle, thank you for joining me.
Absolutely, Tom. Good to be with you.
So as you wrote over the weekend, at least 2 NFL teams have reached out to Urban Meyer about potentially becoming their coach next season. Urban's name comes up connection with college programs pretty often. You know, USC's job isn't open, and he gets bandied about with USC. Then Texas, also a job that is notably not open. Just a few weeks ago, he just turned them down. So what would make an NFL job more appealing to Urban?
I think there are several reasons why the NFL would be appealing, and the Jacksonville Jaguars in particular. I think number one with the Jaguars is they're locked into the number one pick, and it's going to be Trevor Lawrence, who is a generational quarterback. I don't know. I'm big on hyperbole, but I mean, the chances of him being a bust, I think, are just so small. I just think he's going to be a star. You have to have a quarterback in the NFL, and Urban would be locked into kind of having this guy who might be great for a decade. It's in the state of Florida, which obviously is a place he and his family have history with. They clearly like that area. Urban has a house in the state still. His daughter Gigi lives there. It would not cause, like a rift with Ohio State fans, which is something he experienced with Florida fans. And I think that's something he does truly care about. He's beloved in Columbus and the state of Ohio. Going to an NFL team wouldn't cause some major problem. Going to Texas, where you would immediately be recruiting head-to-head against Ohio State, would have not been good. I think in the NFL, there's much less of a chance of him pulling Ohio State staff members to go with him, which is another thing that would keep him in the good graces of the Buckeyes. The NFL is still pressure-packed position, being a head coach, but I don't think it's near the demand that a college job is. First of all, you're not recruiting, which makes a big difference. Jacksonville has a pretty laid-back fan base. I don't think he'd be dealing with a demanding media that you have with Ohio State, or a fan base like Ohio State or Florida. It's not the New York Jets, where you're going to have people hounding you if you go 2-14 or 3-13. I think it's a job he could kind of ease into for a year or two before they expect maybe going to the playoffs. So I just think there's all sorts of reasons. It's kind of a now or never type thing at Urban's age, being away from the game for a couple years. And it's that challenge that he's never taken, kind of like the one thing standing in the way. I mean, if he could go to the NFL, not even win a Super Bowl, but just go and have success, I mean, that puts him even more up on that all-time football coach Mount Rushmore. So I think there's many, many appealing things to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Now, I mean, it's interesting because his last 2 stops have ended sort of similar ways. A lot of pressure at Florida, ended up in health issues. A lot of pressure at Ohio State, ended in some health issues. So, I mean, as you mentioned, like, those are some real pressure cooker jobs. So that's, potentially being in a smaller market like Jacksonville might help with that. The other thing, and you touched on this really briefly, that might make a difference is the schedule. The schedule for a college coach is you're out recruiting all the time. You're on the phone recruiting all the time. It is a year-round job in a way that the NFL maybe isn't. So, I mean, that could also be something that potentially makes that a little bit more appealing than a college gig for him.
Yeah, I think the off-season lifestyle for sure would be a nice, it's just not the every single day type of grind where you're constantly calling people. I mean, there's a famous story after Florida beat Oklahoma in 2009 or 10, I forget what year, to win the national championship, where Urban was like calling recruits in the locker room like 15 minutes after. Like, he just couldn't stop. You're just so intense and locked in all the time. I don't think you have to be that way in the NFL. I mean, part of that is just it's his personality. So, I mean, maybe some of that would still exist in an NFL job. The thing that you were kind of alluding to, the wins and losses. Urban is famous. I mean, as famous as any coach in the history of the sport, I think, for taking losses so hard. I mean, I think you could recalibrate yourself to kind of know, hey, like the reason I was that way in college was because if you lose one game, it can wreck your entire season. I mean, Urban knows. I mean, you can go 10-6 and make the playoffs unless, you're the Browns. So I think that I would hope that he would go into it kind of being aware of that and knowing that he doesn't have to live and die with every single win and loss. Because if he doesn't, I mean, you're just going to immediately just burn yourself dry to a crisp. Because Jacksonville, I don't think in 2021 is going to be a playoff team.
No, I mean, and I have a very tough time seeing him adjusting to that right away. I mean, we both have covered him, and go back to after games, after losses, those post-game press conferences were generally pretty short, pretty salty. I mean, it was not real hard. He did not do a very good job hiding exactly how annoyed he was when they lost, and it didn't happen very often. But the Iowa game in 2017, the Oklahoma game in 2017, Purdue in 2018. I mean, like those like really stick out as this is someone who can't do this very often. And I mean, think back to the famous picture of him sitting in the golf cart eating pizza after the 2013 Big Ten championship game. Like he's not, I mean, as in the word you use, not calibrated to lose well and handle that well. And, the jump from the college to the pros, it sometimes works great. I mean, Pete Carroll went from USC to the Seattle Seahawks and has won a Super Bowl. And I mean, he's been fantastic. And then, there's Nick Saban. And I know you have, I'll let you do your Nick Saban in the pros bit in a minute. But I mean, he went 9-7 and 6-10 in his 2 seasons with the Dolphins and then went back to Alabama. And, I it's not a slam dunk. I don't think that he would definitely be a huge success. And I don't know if he's the type of person that can recalibrate himself. That's going to be a real challenge. And if he can, I think he could do a great job. I don't know if he could, I don't know if 11-5 is acceptable in his mind.
Yeah. I mean, I would think he could recalibrate to the extent where 11-5 would be okay with him if you're going to the playoff, winning your division. I mean, those are the goals you kind of set before a season. I could see him, going 6-10 and being completely beside himself and all that. The one thing about Urban, though, I mean, he is a brilliant guy. I mean, he's so smart. He's really intelligent. I mean, if you watch him on Fox, you see that all the time. Like, he will do all the research, whatever, to make sure like he's cut out for the job. He'll hire smart people to be around him. I mean, he's always been so good at identifying staff members. But I mean, from Bowling Green all the way to Ohio State. I mean, you look at his staffs throughout his career, it's pretty amazing what those people are doing now. So I know the NFL would be entirely different, but I'm confident that he would have a good team around him and do all the necessary things to be, locked in and give it 110% and kind of, make the right decision, not treat it as like a retirement job some other coaches have completely failed because they took, the total wrong approach and all that. So I'm not saying he would be a success, but I think he would give it a really good try.
Well, Urban, the guy he gets compared to most at the college level is Nick Saban. Saban went 15-17 in 2 years with the Dolphins. I mean, I guess there's a certain element of this where if Urban goes to the pros and can win and Saban couldn't do it, like maybe that's a little like, thumb in Nick Saban's eye. But go ahead and explain the 15-17 Nick Saban record. Maybe not quite what it looks like on the surface.
Yeah, well, I mean, just 15-17. I mean, yeah, it's a losing record. I get it. But like, that's not some horrible failure in NFL terms. I mean, it's a league where you're built to kind of go 8-8. I mean, I remember when Pete Carroll came back from USC and went to Seattle, everyone was like, oh, like, why are the Seahawks hiring this guy? Like, he's a failed NFL coach. And like, he had like a 500 record, I think, when he was with the Patriots before. And obviously he's been phenomenal with Seattle. But I mean, Saban, it all came down to a quarterback, which is, I think, the difference. I mean, they had Dante Culpepper instead of Drew Brees. I mean, Brees was going to go there. He failed his physical, and I think the rest is kind of history. I don't know if the Miami Dolphins become the New England Patriots, but I think there's a legitimate possibility that Nick Saban is still in the NFL right now if the Dolphins ended up with Drew Brees. So, I mean, perhaps Urban Meyer goes to the Jaguars and he coaches there for like 7 years. And I don't know, he's known as a great NFL and college coach. I mean, I think it would be fascinating to see. I hope he takes the job and they get Trevor Lawrence just to see, what would happen. His offensive philosophy clearly would change. It would be something different than what you saw at Ohio State and Florida. But I'm confident that he would hire people so it wouldn't be just a total flame out situation.
Yeah, that will be very interesting to watch. If he does end up with the Jags and does end up with Trevor Lawrence, then you've got your quarterback that Nick Saban didn't have. So you'd have one up on Nick already. Now, while Urban is looking at the NFL, his former team, now just 4 days away from playing Clemson in the college football playoff semifinal in the Sugar Bowl, there are a million interesting storylines around this game. I sat down and started just making a list this weekend. And I was like, well, I don't have anywhere near enough days to write half of these stories. But let's start with the very basic stuff. What is the single biggest thing the Buckeyes need to have happen to win the game on Friday?
I'll answer that question in a second, but I totally agree. I mean, for a writer, this is awful, having no time in between the bowl games. I mean, usually we have a month. Every story we want to write, we have plenty of time to do it all. But I mean, there's, like you said, a million storylines with this game, and it's just hard to execute everything we want to do because there's no time. But anyway, you ask, well, what's the most important thing? Is that what you said?
Yes. Most important thing for the Buckeyes to be able to win the game on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a tough one because, I mean, you could go offensively, defensively. I don't know. I tend to think more on the defensive side just because I think Ohio State will score points. I mean, it's kind of a combination. This is also like, oh, no kidding, Captain Obvious. But like Trevor Lawrence was the difference last year, his legs. I mean, that was just a huge thing. I think he had 106 rushing yards, obviously had the really long touchdown run. So limiting him in the run, I think Haskell Garrett perhaps could emerge as like the critical player in this game. Like, can you pressure Lawrence? Can you get him down? Can you prevent these runs? Applying pressure is kind of the other angle with Lawrence. A guy who's probably going to be, a 10-year player in the NFL, if you give him time to throw the ball, like he's going to complete it most of the time, and it's going to be a big problem for Ohio State, which has a secondary that, maybe there are still issues there. I'm pretty confident that Shaun Wade, this is a game where he's really going to want to show out. So I'm not totally worried about that side, but the other side of the field, I think, could be a problem. So to me, the biggest thing is limiting Lawrence, I guess, throwing and running, but especially running. I think that's just such an underrated factor in this game.
And yeah, I mean, I think that it's interesting that there's a real possibility Ohio State can control the line of scrimmage, like really control the line of scrimmage on one or both sides of the ball. And if they can do that, that seems like, okay, now there's like a legitimate path to victory. If they can pressure Lawrence just rushing 4, because you don't want to blitz him. He's going to, he's too good. He's going to pick you apart if you're bringing a bunch, you're bringing 5-6 guys. But if they can get pressure with 4, that seems like that might be something that could potentially make a big difference for them on defense. On the other side of the ball, I mean, I think everyone's probably penciling Ohio State in for at least 31, 35, 38 points, probably. What is the one thing that could really derail them? Is it the Justin Fields thumb situation? Is it the offensive line, and is the offensive line completely settled? Like what is the big concern on the offensive side of the ball for Ohio State? Is there one?
I mean, I guess Justin Fields, but I think it's a little overrated. Like, I mean, I see so many people panicking about Justin Fields. Like, I mean, threw 3 interceptions against Indiana. I mean, other than that, I know it's like 3 important things. I mean, these interceptions or whatever. I mean, he was pretty good in that game, I thought. Northwestern in the Big Ten title game, obviously, was not probably his worst game of his college career. But I don't know. Like, he's essentially had, 1 or 2 bad games, and now all of a sudden everyone's just like, oh, well, Justin Fields is terrible now, so Ohio State has no chance. I just think it's kind of a weird thing. And I don't know, maybe I'm creating a straw man argument, but I feel like that is like out there with a decent amount of people in the media, on Twitter, whatever. But I mean, Ohio State does not have to replicate 2014, which a lot of that was Ezekiel Elliott running for just hundreds of yards. But I mean, Trey Sermon's performance against Michigan State, really good, amazing in the Big Ten title game. Like, if he can continue, having these 100-yard games, whatever, I mean, I think that just makes such a world of difference for Ohio State's offense. I've been a little bit of a Trey Sermon apologist, I think, since he transferred in March. I just thought he fit perfectly into what Ohio State wants to do offensively. And even earlier in the year when people were kind of down on him, he's not doing, what people thought, he was still averaging a lot of yards per rush. I thought he was still better than he got credit for. And now, obviously, he's been great. So I really think Sermon could be a huge difference maker in this playoff run if Ohio State is to, get to the title game and maybe even win it.
Well, we started by talking about something you wrote over the weekend, so we better let people know where they can find you on Twitter and where they can find your work at the Toledo Blade.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Kyle Rowland, just KYLEROWLAND, or online, ToledoBlade.com, and with our wonderful app, Blade Newsslide.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Great reporting this weekend, and looking forward to seeing you down in New Orleans in just a day or so.
All right. Sounds great, Tom. Thank you.
All right. And thank you guys for joining us this morning. You can make sure you check out all of our great content at BuckeyesScoop.com. Tony Gerderman and I will be on the road today and start turning content. We have a Clemson press conference this morning and Ohio State press conference this afternoon. And then we'll be down in New Orleans on Tuesday to really hit the ground running with a lot of great content from there. So you can find all of that at BuckeyesScoop.com. Also, make sure you check out all of our great podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. You can subscribe right there. Also, please leave us a 5-star rating and review while you're at it. That will help new folks find our shows as well. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.